Welcome to I Wish You Could Hear This, where we explore great stories and simple proven steps to help you thrive in life, faith, and relationships.
In our research, we've heard hundreds of hope-filled strategies for marriage, parenting, leadership, and life that are grounded in science and consistent with biblical truth. And now you can hear them too.
I'm Shaunti Feldhahn.
And I'm Jeff Feldhahn.
Dr. Michael Sytsma is a renowned therapist on marriage and intimacy who has trained many other clinicians in the field of sex therapy. He's also a pastor. He is appointed by the Wesleyan Church to lead Building Intimate Marriages, which is a ministry and a counseling practice. In 35 years of working with men, women, and adolescents, he has seen pretty much everything. If you have questions, he has answers. So today on the podcast, we are going to unpack the most common questions that he hears, get his answers, and share those secrets that everyone needs to know.
And let me add to the bio. He's just an all-around good guy. I mean, he's got it going on. And as a former Michigander,
oh yes,
there is
you had to mention that. Absolutely,
he's got it working. So, Dr. Mike, thanks for being here on our podcast.
Oh, thanks. It's an honor to be here. I so appreciate you guys and what you do. So I'm glad to be a part.
Thank you. And we should kind of, for this particular episode, we should let all the folks out there listening that this might be one of our PG episodes. So, today's topic, it might not be appropriate for some little ears that are hearing it.
Yeah, definitely. This is a discretion topic.
Things that I never thought would be said about me as a pastor.
Or us.
When God called me to pastor, I didn't expect that most of my talks would be things that you go, you might not want the kids in the room for this.
Right? Isn't that amazing?
That's awesome.
So God has an interesting sense of humor.
Yeah, so
yes,
we've gave you a little bit of introduction here. But what else did we miss, Mike, that you could share with our listeners?
God called me to bring the message of the gospel to where people are hurting, to help address the concerns, to be focused on discipleship. And for a long time I did that as a pastor, was trained as an addictions therapist, and even worked inpatient for quite a while. Then I fell in love with doing marriage work, seeing that as the ultimate discipleship tool. And I started working with sex addicts in 1990. So when I started working with couples, it was natural to feel comfortable talking about the sexual arena of their life. And I went on and got my PhD specializing in marital sex therapy. And I've done that work now since 98. So I started my pastoral work in 86. So it's almost been 40 years that I've been working with couples. It's kind of scary.
And when we did the research together, and we co-authored
why don't you
the book.
Explain?
Yeah, so we co-authored a book with Dr. Mike called it came out in 2023 called The Secrets of Sex and Marriage. And it was all about unlocking kind of the intimate secrets for folks.
And then we did a small group study and a couple study called Unlocking an Intimate Marriage, which was really fascinating because Dr. Mike had been wanting for, I don't know how many years, 20 years, you've been wanting to do something for the church that people could do safely together in a small group to be able to address some of these issues and then go home and talk about it as couples. And so...
Right. Something that would be safe, but still invite them to have those deep, tough conversations.
Yes. So that's called Unlocking an Intimate Marriage. The book is called Secrets of Sex and Marriage. We'll put that in the show notes.
And one of the things that the listeners should know is that for about 3 years while we were working on the research for that book, we spent every Wednesday morning with Dr. Mike in his office unpacking his experience and working on, what is it that the average couple just doesn't get? And also Shaunti and me being embarrassed much of the time because he's been working in this area for 30 plus years. Nothing shocks him.
Well, and he would love, I'm just going to give everybody a peek into what those 3 years were like. You know what I'm going to say, right, Mike? Where literally he would so enjoy using like anatomically correct terms and like watching us squirm, like blush, because it was so difficult for us to talk about it. He was like, you know what, if you're going to do this research project in this book, you're going to have to get over that.
So we appreciated that. And when the research wrapped up, it was kind of bittersweet because we just loved hanging out together all that time.
Well, we loved hanging out.
Yes, we.
No, I did too. It was a lot of fun.
So, all right. So, Dr. Mike, I know everybody's like, okay, enough with the old friends school. Let's talk about the questions, because you see so many people, like you see them as clients. You just speak to a lot of different people in your, kind of daily life at churches and whatever, and take a lot of questions. Like you do events and people ask you a lot of questions. You've trained a lot of sex therapists who work with many other people and heard what the kind of questions are that they get. So really, I mean, let's just be blunt for our listeners. There are very, very few therapists out there with the type of experience that you have, and add to that
or the training
right?
There are a lot of people that talk about feeling very comfortable in working in marital sexuality or in individual sexuality, but very few of them actually have formalized training in it.
Yeah.
And I have so many clients come to see me or email questions. My therapist said this, and I think, who trained them? And I go and look, and they have no training. So they're speaking out of what they believe, and often the mythology that's shared is not accurate. So yeah, I'm an adjunct or visiting professor in 5 different seminaries and grad schools, and we teach a few hundred students and pastors every year. Kind of what the mythology is and what are some accurate stuff on sexuality.
Okay, so playing off of that, can you help our listeners understand a little bit more? What was the research behind the book that we all
we
did
should
together?
probably talk
Give
about
a little
that.
bit of that,
Yeah.
as well as any other research that you've done outside of that particular research.
Probably would start even with my dissertation. I finished that in 2004, and that, like our study, was a matched pair sample, which means we were studying both the husbands and wives. Husbands and wives didn't take it together. They didn't know how each other responded, but due to coding and the way we took it, we were able to match them up. So it's called dyadic data or match pair data. It's really unique in the field. Gives some fascinating abilities to study. So I can ask, for example, hey, Jeff, what's your favorite color? And I can ask Shaunti, what do you think Jeff's favorite color is? And we see, do you guys line up? What is Shaunti's favorite color? And what does Jeff think Shaunti's favorite color is? And then we can go another level and even say, hey, Jeff, what do you think Shaunti's going to say your favorite color is?
Okay.
And so it can get really, and that allows us to look at what we call attributional error, which when it comes to working with sexuality gets really important. Because if we say, well, how often do you have an orgasm? And how important is that orgasm to you? And how important do you think it is for your spouse that you have one? How important is it to you that your spouse has one? And how important is it that your spouse thinks that you have? And we can really get complex in this and look at how people misunderstand each other. And then we can show that those misunderstandings contribute to overall happiness and satisfaction, to frequency, to communication, and we can tie that into a lot of different variables. So in my dissertation, we saw distress related to desire discrepancy. Who wants more than the other? That's we call a discrepancy score. And for most of the couples we were working with, the husband had a slightly higher level of desire than the wife did. And is the distress that's caused by how high his or how low hers is. And in those that, for our study, it was right about 20% were reversed. Is it about the high or the low individual? Is it about how far apart they are? Or is it about what they think about each other? And what I found is that how high somebody is predicted very little distress. How low somebody is predicted a little bit of distress. If the low desire spouse really didn't want to have sex, that was going to increase some distress. The discrepancy score, which is often what we look at, the difference between the high and the low, predicted quite a bit, But I look at it and thought, that's not enough. There's something else going on here. And what I found is that the difference between what the high desire person believes about the low desire person and what the low desire person knows about themselves, the bigger that gap is, the more distress there is. So it's not about how high or low somebody's desire was. It's about how well they understood each other and how well they sorted through that.
And the story that they told one another. The story that they told themselves.
Huge.
Yeah, about he's just selfish, or she just doesn't desire me.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the wife that sits in my office and says, he doesn't find me attractive anymore. He never wants to have sex with me. And we explore with him, that's not true. Neither of those statements are true. But that story getting into there causes an awful lot of distress, and that they're not able to talk through it well enough and hear each other well enough to deconstruct it.
So it's interesting we're talking about the stories that we tell one another and the things that we hear, because I want to talk about a story that you have told us multiple times, that you come away from an event and you're like, I got the same 2 questions from people. And I'd love to start unpacking the questions that you get, but let's start with that, because you would literally come on Wednesdays. You're like, yep, I was just at an event this weekend and I got the same 2 top questions. So tell everybody listening, as a sex therapist who gets asked lots of questions, what are these 2 questions that you constantly get asked?
Probably the most common one is some form of, are we normal or am I normal? This is what's going on for us. Are we normal? We want to do this. Is that normal? We experience these things differently. And people so want to know that where they're at is kind of okay. That what they're asking for, what their spouse is asking for those that are faith-based, often that ties into a sense of, is this okay? Which would be kind of the next
That's sort of the second
question
question,
I get.
right?
Yeah.
Can we?
Can we do this? Is it okay to do this? Is it damaging to do this? Can we bring toys in? Is that okay, or is it going to hurt our relationship? Is it outside of God's law? So the am I normal and can we?
Okay, so now everybody is listening and going, okay, and how do you answer those 2? Give us some answers.
This is going in a direction that Jeff, in his Midwestern upbringing, did not envision. But go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, the primary answer to the are we normal is yes, and in fact, the research that we did together, looking at initiating couples, receptive to couples, and resistant couples, and the huge number of people that are receptive, both males and females. When I go into a workshop or I sit in my office and I teach that those are 2 very healthy, normal kinds of desire. And I sometimes like to stand outside the door where people can't see me and listen to them as they're leaving a workshop or something, just to hear what they're saying to each other. And one of the most common things I hear is one spouse looking at the other and saying, we're normal. We fight about the same things every other couple fights about. I'm normal. I'm not broken. There are a lot of people that are just like me in their approach to sex and sexuality.
Yeah.
And I think, we don't have the research that I would like, but I think, what would that look like over the next 6 months if they truly let it sink in that maybe I'm normal? Maybe there's not something broken in me. Maybe there's not something broken in you. Maybe we're just different.
Yeah,
not maybe
defective.
There's a divergence issue, not a brokenness. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Jeff and I, ever since our research, if we do a marriage event, often the pastor or the women's ministry director or somebody will say, "Can you add in the conversation about intimacy?
Yes.
Can you touch on that?" And we will often put on the screen one of the key chart findings that from the study that all of us did together of how often are couples actually having sex. And, we can't put it on the screen here, but you can see it in the book. And I'm looking at it right now. It's on page 41 of the book. And like for example, 29% of couples say, again, the matched pair survey, that they're having sex 1 to 2 times a week. But the interesting thing, when you look at the pie chart, it's basically like a quarter, a quarter, a quarter, a quarter. Like there is no one like central number. Like we're all over the map. So whatever is going on, you're normal. Yeah.
Very likely are. The extreme edges, those that were having sex daily or more, or those that were not having sex at all. Yes. Or the 9% that weren't at all. Those are a little bit outside the boundaries, but yeah, in terms of couples that are actively working on it, they're intentional with it. They fall in line with that kind of normal range. And then what do people want? Sometimes that can get really divergent, and we'll work with people that have a kink, for example. Some of the estimates are that as many as half of people may have one, and some of those are healthy to bring into marriage and some of them aren't. So we'll spend time sorting through that piece of it. But to have something that you want to do that may be a little bit atypical, that's fairly normal, is what most of the research is saying. And the issue is, again, what's the story that we tell of it? And can it be okay to talk about it, even if it's kind of sequestered to not really okay for our relationship, or we can do it occasionally, just don't put pressure on me to do that.
That's important.
That's the key.
So I'm curious, Mike, about something. So what was your favorite thing that we researched and discussed in the research and the book? What do you think, kind of has the greatest resonance? And maybe those are two different questions.
Well, my perspective is going to line them up because I think what's important to me is going to be impactful.
Okay, good.
So most of my career, my energy, my focus has been in desire discrepancy. That's the number one sexual issue that comes in for therapy, whether it's a marital therapist or a sex therapist. So looking at how couples handled that, and then the look at the different types. So we have different types of desire and different levels of desire, and looking at how those play out. And so we looked at chapter, what was it, 4 and 5. We looked at the different types of desire, of receptive and initiating. And then we put that into a cross tab to see how many couples both were initiating, kind of that Hollywood ideal that, what everybody thinks needs to be, and finding that, only 10% of couples fit that. What was it, 44% of couples hit the kind of where he is the initiator and she's receptive, and about a quarter couples where both of them are receptive. And being able to look at that, and I'm going to be in Croatia in May at the International Symposium on Sex Therapy presenting some of this data, because we looked at the 9 different couples that crosstab revealed, and looking at the differences between them. If both husband and wife are receptive, when do they ever have sex? If nobody's initiating this, and were the frequencies lower? And what I found is, yes, the frequencies in those couples were lower than the ones where both of them were initiating. But what was really fascinating is when we looked at overall marital satisfaction and overall sexual satisfaction, they were almost identical.
Wow.
And we would think that those where both are initiating and they have a higher sexual frequency are going to be happier, more content, enjoying their relationship. And that's not so.
I love this. See,
those where both were receptive, even though the frequency was a little bit lower, they were happy. Just as happy.
So this
is new data, right? This is taking the data set, and Mike has been running more data.
But here's what this reminds me of. Yep. Shaunti and I were speaking at a marriage conference, a year or so ago in San Antonio. And, we were sharing the numbers, the data on, the frequency levels.
It was that
pie chart that
yes.
Shaunti read about earlier.
Yeah.
And when we got to the part where we said, and then, you see that 4% is, every day or more, there was a couple sitting in the front and they looked at each other and high-fived. And so they were, I'm not exactly sure what their numbers were, but they were very happy.
Shaunti likes to say that nothing in the data surprised me, but the connection between those really high-frequency couples and the number of children was totally shocking to me. In fact, I ran it 3 times, and I took it all the way back to the original data, re-entered everything, recoded it all, and reran it because I was convinced it was a mistake. And it wasn't. That the couples who had 3 or more kids were far more likely to be having sex daily or more. The couples that had no kids were far more likely to be sexless.
And what was shocking was you would have thought that having that many kids, it would drop off, right?
Right,
yeah.
right. And not having kids around, the belief is not having kids around gives a flexibility and a freedom to be spontaneous with our sexual connection. And that's not what the data really was extremely clear on showing.
That is fascinating. And so you said, I think we talked over you, I think you said that the couples that were having sex less than once a month or never were far more likely to not have children. Is that what
Correct.
you just said? Wow. Okay.
Wow.
See, we really do need to reconnect because I need to hear what some of these numbers you've run in the last 6 or 12 months.
And we step back and we try to talk about, well, what's going on there? Why is this? One of my theories is couples that have more kids are going to be couples that value marriage, they value family, they value the kind of traditional nuclear family structure, which includes attitudes of serving one another, attitudes of seeking each other, of pursuing one another, of connecting with one another, that have a higher value of sex and the connectedness. Those that have no kids, one of the theories is that they don't have the same value for family and marriage and are more self-focused on what's in it for me. And if you are married very long and you have a self-focus, sex life is dramatically drops. Wow. It's about being intentional and choosing to seek each other out, choosing to engage in our sex life because it's healthy, because it's good for us. And couples that have kids understand that way of living. That we do things that are healthy, that are good for us. We fix healthy meals because they're healthy, not because it's easy.
Right.
So.
Right.
Okay, so speaking of being intentional, since one of the reasons why people are listening to this podcast is like, okay, what are the questions that, you get because they might help me. Your answers might help me. And so thinking about everything we've talked about, what's another type of common question that comes up, something we haven't touched on yet, that comes up a lot in your practice or at events?
If we step outside of the am I normal and can we, the next thing I'm going to get is how do we? And usually it falls into a category of how do I get my spouse to? I want this to, how do I get my spouse to behave in this way? Or how do I get my spouse to want sex more? How do I get my spouse to be more connecting and to seduce me, to draw me into sex more? How do I get my spouse to be different than what they are? And, we really answered that in chapter 7, 8, and 9. You've heard me do a talk on your sexual superpower, because when we're trying to get our spouse to do something, we set up a power dynamic that shuts people down. My husband is behaving in ways that I find offensive, and I get angry at him to try to make him do it different. That makes perfect sense to me, but it's usually not productive. And my wife is not engaging with me as much as I want her to. And so I start to act like a wounded 9-year-old little boy. And, that doesn't work too well as I try to pressure her into it. And we talked about curiosity and seduction and grace in those 3 chapters. And how do we kind of flip the script in our marriages to draw our spouse into my favorite language, to seduce them, to woo them, to entice them into connecting. I think that's phenomenally Christ reflective, but it's so difficult for us to do. So all manner of questions of how do I get my spouse to? fall into the more you push, the more you try to coerce or demand, the less successful you tend to be.
So the way that you might put it, in to make it a simple answer, if obviously it's not going to be this simple, but to be able to saying how do I get my spouse to is the wrong question. The better question is,
it's how do I draw them into this space? A couple of images here. One is I like to point out that Christ was profoundly invitational. About the only people that I see him being harsh and demanding with were those that used his law to wound others. Where he says, you do not use my law that way. That's not how it was intended, and you're bad for doing that, essentially. Otherwise, he was really invitational. Come follow me. And they drop their life profession to just follow him. That's a profound invitation. And we also know it with our kids. If I demand my kids do something, we develop a battle. And the older they are, the less effective we're going to be in that battle. Where if I can get to where I'm enticing them to do something, that I show them how great it is, and I get them to where they want it, I'm going to be far more successful. And that doesn't change when we step into marriage. So how do we develop a way of communicating with each other that's open, that's curious, that is honoring, to where I can say, I've been thinking about this and it sounds like a lot of fun to me. Can we talk about it? And maybe we'll spend weeks or months even talking about it as an idea, and what would be the boundaries for it, and what would it look like, and what's the vision? What do I think is going to come out of this, until we are sharing a vision together, and now we're pursuing it together. Maybe one person is leading it more than the other, putting more energy into it, but we're doing this together as a couple. And that may be a behavior. It may be she says, my heart is a lot more open to you when you sit across the table from me and we share a cup of coffee and talk for 10 minutes. What would it take for me to encourage you to do that? And he says, well, stop telling me everything I tell you is wrong. Okay, that's valuable.
Right.
yes.
Let's talk about that. Let's figure out how to seduce each other to be in this shared space.
Wow.
And it's no different in the shared space of being naked and unashamed in the bed.
So let's go gently and carefully into a little further into some of these, areas where couples sometimes find it hard to talk about. One of the questions that we get fairly frequently for people who comment on something on Instagram or DM us behind the scenes or email us, or when we're doing marriage events, we'll often do anonymous questions through like an interactive polling program. So people can ask these questions anonymously. So we get some really interesting questions. But one of the big kind of categories today, and has been for a while, is from women whose husbands are feeling kind of enmeshed in a bit of pornography compulsion. Like the husband may not want to be. Like, we're not necessarily talking about where it's like unrepentant, it's no problem. I mean, no, that happens too. Right. But in general, especially amongst people of faith, it's more likely that they just feel this compulsion. They feel trapped.
And shame.
And so husbands...
Right, I was going to say a lot of shame about it.
A lot of shame. So the questions we often get are husbands asking, what do I do? And the wife asking, what do I do? Right? Like, how do I handle it?
Right.
And so I'm curious. That's a very sensitive topic, but I'm curious how you would respond to that husband, how you'd respond to that wife.
Well, I think the same principles of starting by being open and curious as much as possible. And when there's something like this that is a understandable threat, it's tough to be curious. Animals, children are curious when they're in a safe environment. They don't tend to be curious when they're in an unsafe environment. So sometimes it can be tough for an issue that's potentially destructive, like pornography, for people to be curious about it. But if they can step in and she can truly ask, help me to understand the appeal, the pull. She thinks she knows, but in my office, many times wives are totally surprised. They think it's about them. They think it's about comparing bodies. They think all of the things that she thinks it's about, it's not. That this has been going on long before he ever met her. Like you said, many times there's a compulsive aspect to it. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of hiddenness. And creating space that he can start to talk through it, that she can detach from it as, wait, this has zero to do with me. And I point out to couples, that's part of the sin of it. That's part of what's wrong, is because you stood at an altar and you promised that sex would be exclusive to each other. So it's supposed to be just about each other. And when we bring in something like pornography or fantasy or things that are from outside the marriage, a lot of women get caught up in reading erotic literature and has some similar effect. Or there's plenty of women that are getting caught up in pornography as well. So whenever we bring something like that into the marriage, we're draining off some energy that we covenanted, we promised to be directed just to the spouse. And so it's wrong that it's not about the spouse, but it isn't. That it's not about her. I mean, every once in a while I'll find it is, but probably 98% of the time it is not. And when she can detach and say, okay, this is about your sin, about your failure, about you not measuring up to who you want to be, then, and it's not about me, now sometimes she can align with him rather than against him. How can I be of help? Because what he really needs to do is link arm in arm with a group of other men, where they get honest with each other and they begin to talk about it. And it's in community of warriors that these issues are solved. I tell the guys I work with that nobody is greater than sin. Sin is older, wiser, stronger than you are. And the moment you think I can defeat this on my own, you've already lost. But you link arm in arm with a bunch of guys that are fighting the same battle. And it's amazing how you start to make progress with it. Standing together, Scripture tells us that the gates of hell don't stand a chance. But you've got to align together. And that means, and one of the rare times that I tell couples, let's not be totally together in this. I think there's a place for openness and honesty, but this is his sin he needs to deal with. Let him go work on it. Check in with him. How can I keep you encouraged? How can I keep you? And then him leaning into what does it do for her? What happens in her heart? And the shame and the guilt and the pain that causes him makes him want to pull away from it. But as he can understand how scared she gets and how wounded she gets and how she wants to just shut down and cover up, that gives energy for him to fight that battle better. But that means they have to be comfortable with the conflict. They have to be comfortable with each other's humanity, that he's going to be ashamed. And he might get angry sometimes when he's ashamed, or he might shut down, or she's going to be hurt and afraid, and she might get angry, or she might shut down, or that it's okay to have human emotions and reactions to it. But we will not let this get in between us. We're going to align and strive towards a goal of what would it look like to not have this a part of our marriage, if that's the goal that the couple set.
That's beautiful.
And that is beautiful.
Obviously, one of the concerns, Mike, with this emphasis on grace.
And we believe in grace.
Oh,
we're grace fans.
Yes. I mean, well, so is Jesus, right? I mean, we all have sin and we all fall short, and we want our spouse to extend grace to us. But we do want to acknowledge that there are occasions when grace has to be given from a distance.
Correct. Yeah. I had a couple in my office this week, and he is engaging in behavior, sexual behavior that is actually putting her life at risk, his own as well, but putting her life at risk. And we have stepped in and we're creating some space that protects. And he's truly, I believe, contrite and broken, and he's wanting to work on being different. But I told her yesterday, if he's not successful with this, if he doesn't stay on this path and he doesn't get well, then you should not be in this relationship with him, because it is not safe to. And that is there is a line where sin gets so destructive that we flee from it, that we run from it, that we get away from it, so it doesn't infect us more. Most of the couples that I work with, by most I mean almost all of them, they get on the path, they fall off a bit, but they stay forward, and grace is the right choice. But there are times that we just have to acknowledge, I can't do this, it's not okay, that you've crossed a line. Even God did that, where people would cross the line, and he drew the line. He opened up the earth, a third of his people fell in, he closed the earth and said, okay, let's try again with the rest of you. We push his grace too far at times, that it can't go further.
And we would encourage, for those of you who are, maybe it's your own situation, maybe it's a loved one's situation, there's a chapter 9 in the book of Secrets of Sex and Marriage, where Mike actually unpacks this more and very beautifully to talk about the importance of protection as well, and protection for the heart, for the body, for the soul, for the spirit. So that we want to acknowledge that is needed too.
In your experience, there is a reason for hope, because people do overcome
profoundly
this.
Every day in my office.
Every day.
That's awesome.
Every day. Yeah.
Very encouraging.
And it is not an easy thing.
Right.
But what I love, Jeff, is the couples that come out of this journey are way more open with each other. They're able to talk with each other. They allow each other to be human, to have failings, to have sin that they are continually battling with, a cross that they have to pick up and carry, that some part of them that they have to crucify daily. That's between you and God. And I hate that you carry it, and I hate how it infects me at times. But it's okay, because we're both human. We are both in this to fight towards being who God has called us to be. And we're gonna do this together. And when couples are able to release and lean in differently, they become really, truly admirable marriages, where they have deep respect for each other, even though they're not perfect, where they have grace for the ongoing wounds that they sometimes cause each other, and yet they have such a tight, intimate bond together that it's really rich. Nothing gets in the way of those
I
couples.
love this, Mike, because I know there are people listening to this, and they're saying, I want that to be my story so much. I want that to be where we land in this struggle. And it can be done.
But what's the encouragement?
It can. It doesn't happen, though, when I look at my spouse and demand that they join me in this.
Okay, so that's
we're
the
right.
question.
We're right back to the problem.
Okay, so that's a great setup for the question I was going to ask, because in my mind's eye, I'm picturing several women that I've spoken to in the research where their husband isn't joining them in that, right? And he's like, look, it's not about you, it's about me. I just have to deal with it, whatever. Or, we're going to put an accountability plan in place, and you're going to go to the men's group, and he goes twice and then stops going. Right. And so give some both encouragement and equipping to that wife who may be listening to this and is trying to address this without, at the moment, her husband being on board.
I'll give an example from last week where she is really wounded by his ongoing behavior. And he said, I have tried to stop it. I have gone to groups, I've gone to meetings, I've talked to guys, and it hasn't stopped. And I've just reached the point that it's going to be a part of my life. And she just needs to accept it or not. Mm-hmm. And part of the challenge was helping her to lean in and say, unpack that a bit for me. So rather than immediately go on the defense and demand that he be a certain way, let's talk about how discouraged you are. Let's talk about how defeated you are. How long has this been going on? And she was shocked at how young he was when this entered his life. She didn't even know that, and they've been married for a long time. And to try to understand and to care for him allowed them to start to join together in it. And then him beginning to explore what I really like. Is this something that I truly want? Or am I kind of okay with my sin? Because if I'm going to justify and be kind of okay with my sin, then it falls back to her. Can you live with it? Can you live with knowing that he's got this pet sin that he's not willing to do anything about? And some wives say absolutely not. I can't respect him. I can't be connected. I can't be in a relationship with him. And some say, well, that kind of sin is really damaging to me, but it's not worth destroying our marriage and our family over. And so they set up boundaries of how to kind of keep it. Oh, it's really hard. But as she does some of that work, then he is often freed to start to look at what does he really want. And this deeply wounds my wife. I'd love to care for her. And can I re-energize myself for the ongoing lifetime battle? Because many times I come in thinking there's got to be 2 or 3 things I can do that will make this go away. Nope, doesn't work that way. This is an ongoing lifetime battle. And are you willing to take that on? If so, the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
And that's the key, I think, right? Is that so many men have given up. Yeah.
And because they think this is an all or nothing. And that is the ideal. That's what we're striving towards, an all or nothing. But getting there is oftentimes falling off the path and getting back on and falling off on the other side and getting back on. But deciding that I will freaking figure out how to walk this path. And I'm going to bring men alongside me who are going to help me to walk it. And we'll extend grace for each other, and we'll make each other toe the line. And we develop this lifetime pattern of it that eventually becomes something that's workable. And if he can have a solid vision for, I really want that in my marriage, and begin the process of working on it, and there's grace in the marriage for each other. Grace that he comes in and he says, yeah, my guys, I'm sorry, I didn't do too well last week, but we've talked about it. And we've got things in place, and we'll do it again. If she can be calm and, I'm sorry, babe, I know you and your guys will keep working on it. Wow. Now we're infusing energy into it, and we're not letting the sin be totally disruptive.
Well, it's almost like, it's interesting because I can hear people shouting at their phones right now or whatever, saying, you're excusing his behavior, and,
we never excuse sin.
We never excuse sin.
Yep.
But it makes...
But we extend enormous grace for it like Christ did.
Well, and that's the thing. It makes me think of, for example, maybe it helps a wife to think about what happens on the flip side if... Like, we were talking to somebody not long ago who her issue was extreme control, wanting to control everything about her husband, thinking she was right, honestly. Like, she wouldn't have said that out loud, but that's basically what she was thinking. Like, she knew the right way to do everything. And he had to learn how to extend grace for that rather than running. And while she was working on it, and she didn't do so good all the time, and she tried. And
I'm sure he didn't every day either.
Correct.
There were days she'd be hypercritical, and he would just be gone, or he'd blow up.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all in all things in marriage. It just happens to be that this issue of sexual sin just hits so much of the tender places of our heart.
Paul talked about how, what is this war that wages within me? Those things I want to do, I can't get myself to do. And he talks about it as a daily battle. And all of these things, we all have our pet sins that are daily battles. But Paul was also clear that sexual sins have a higher cost. They're not a greater sin, but they do have a different kind of cost. And they cost into the marital relationship a little bit differently many times.
So it's important to know that.
One of the things that we always try to end our episode with is a big takeaway. One takeaway, because, we've shared a whole lot of stuff here. People hear it. Hopefully they've been encouraged and they've learned a lot, but we forget things. So if there was kind of one thing that you wanted someone to take away from this episode, what would it be?
If I was to just quickly think back over what we've talked about, I might summarize it, and no pun intended, that this type of intimacy is messy. But it's messy because we're imperfect people that want certain things, and we think we're right in wanting them, and we tend to default to demanding each other be who we want. And if we can accept that intimacy is messy, and I am not perfect and my spouse is not perfect, what is the vision that we're striving toward? And if I believe that my spouse is truly striving towards that vision and wants it, and I truly am striving for that vision and want it, we can give a lot of grace for the times that we step off the path. Because I know that's not who you want to be. You want to be the person who's striving towards a vision that we have co-created and we both believe in. That allows for marriage to be a little messy and gracious. We're not excusing sin, as you said, but we're acknowledging that it is a part of who we are as we continue to be sanctified, as we continue to be discipled, as we continue to strive towards who God's called us to be. And if I can believe in your ability to be that someday, and my ability to be that someday, we can keep having fun and playing together and figuring it out while we strive towards it.
That's so beautiful. I think what I'm hearing is on today's episode of I Wish You Could Hear This, the thing we most want you to hear is that there is power in having grace with one another.
Oh, enormous.
And extending the same grace to your spouse in this area of marriage, this intimate area of marriage, as you would want extended to you in any other area of marriage and in any other area of life. I think I've heard that somewhere before. Do unto
Probably
others.
from
I think I've heard that somewhere before. So,
Mike, thank you so much. Where can folks
always enjoy it.
Find more about you, your ministry?
Our website is intimatemarriage.org, and there's blog posts, there's a bunch of podcasts like this and stuff that they can learn more about. And then, of course, our book, that website, secretsofsexandmarriage.com, there's a lot of resources there. We put a lot of energy into things like when sex shows up or when there's trauma, or there's some great resources that are there
referral
as
resources
well.
there.
Right. Where to find help.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Michael Sytsma, for coming on our show today. And check out his resources at intimatemarriage.org. You can see his details in the show notes, all the stuff we've been talking about. Also, please share today's episode, especially if there's someone that you've been sharing with about these topics and you know is interested in it as well. And tag Dr. Michael Sytsma on all your social media channels. Thanks for listening to I Wish You Could Hear This. Remember to subscribe to our podcast. And as always, forward today's audio or video link to a friend, counselor, or pastor who would be encouraged.